The time is now, episode 317.
The time is now to learn all you can, to educate others, to move in solidarity and mobilize.
Welcome to The Time Is Now, the podcast for mission-driven solopreneurs ready to take action and go from invisible to in demand. I am your host, Amel Derragui. My mission is to help you cut through the noise, get crystal clear on your strategy, and position yourself as the go-to expert in your field. But this podcast isn't just about marketing. It's also about building your resilience and staying ahead of the shifts in our world so you can be the leader and change maker you truly are. This is your time to create more growth, alignment, and impact in your business. Today, we're diving into a question so many of us are wrestling with. How do we show up and speak up when the world feels so chaotic, when humanity and democracy are being challenged? If you've been feeling the weight of global crisis, from the genocides that are happening, the erosion of democracy, the rise of violence, and authoritarianism worldwide, know that you're not alone. I have been there too, if I'm not still there. The thing is that I'm a true believer that as global citizens, but also as leaders and solo entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs, we do have the responsibility to speak up. But in the past couple of years, it felt difficult to do so in full integrity for me, and in a place of empowerment rather than anger. Our guest today, Melissa Dalton Bradford, played a crucial role in helping me find hope again, and I cannot wait to share her wisdom with you today. In this conversation, we will explore how to resist misinformation, reclaim agency, and take small, powerful steps to defend democracy and humanity using our voices, but also our platforms and our audiences. Melissa Dalton Bradford is an author, speaker, a global citizen who has spent decades advocating for human dignity. She co-founded 2 NGOs to support refugees and amplify their stories, for instance, with the initiative TSOS, which means Their Story is Our Story. In 2024, she began teaching online about the warning signs of democratic decline, growing a community of over 240,000 followers on Instagram, inspiring a global movement of moral courage that refuses to return to the authoritarian rule. So, Melissa, I cannot tell you how happy and excited and grateful I am to have you here. Thank you for being here and welcome to The Time Is Now.
Thank you, Amel. I'm so glad that we can have this time together.
Me too. And you know, it's interesting how destiny works. You have been one of my first podcast guests at the time where I started 10 years ago, and you had shared so much deepness into your story. And I will be sharing your past interviews in the show notes of this episode for the listeners who want to know more about you. We talked a lot about your role as a global mom, going through grief, and the books that you wrote about this topic. It's interesting that we are in a way grieving again, somehow. We're grieving our freedoms. Now it is challenged. And you have been speaking up and showing up. Before you got so visible in the past year, you have been engaged throughout your life and your story into humanitarian work. So I would love to know, look, what got you to where you are today, and how does everything come together for you? If you can give us a snapshot of why do you think you're doing what you're doing today?
Well, I think that it is the blessing of geography. We were living in Geneva, and fate would have it that we moved to Frankfurt, Germany. It wasn't a place that we had on our map, but it was the professional move for my husband. It was very good for one of our children. We end up in Frankfurt in 2014. And you know what I thought, Amel? I thought, well, here's where I'm going to write my historical fiction. This is where I'm going to finally write my novel. So I laid out everything on my big writing desk, ready to write this book. And within months, the entire crisis in the Middle East began. And Frankfurt became a hub receiving hundreds of thousands of refugees from the Middle East. That immediately drew me in. And our episodes from before would probably help people understand why I was somebody who understood moving a lot. what that means. Even in the most privileged circumstances, our family had also experienced traumatic loss in the middle of one of these moves. I knew something about that. But I have to add as a caveat that with all of those moves, we're now on our 21st move over 9 countries. And our tragic cataclysmic loss, none of that really touches even the hem of what these refugees are experiencing. Because I never have experienced war, persecution, nobody accepting me for my faith, my ethnicity, whatever. But I knew that my heart was going to be engaged with these people. I knew it instantly. And I've taught language on the university level, and I knew that language is the key to entering and stabilizing in any culture. So I was at the train station when the first train started coming into Frankfurt with the big sign that said, Willkommen in Deutschland. And that juncture right there was a major pivot in my life. And I learned lessons from my close engagement with people who were fleeing war and persecution. I understood what the rest of my life was going to be about. I just knew it instantly. And that work, like you mentioned, turned into nonprofit work. It turned into speaking tours. It turned into a book project, all of that, and deep, deep relationships. And then COVID hit. And within a short time, the war in Ukraine began.
Mm.
And if anybody's watching that, you know that many of these people, again, hundreds of thousands, landed in Frankfurt. And I immediately jumped in. I was teaching halls full of Ukrainian refugees. And I've been doing that up until last week. So several classes a week. That's how it happens. I think the universe has been kind to me, however we want to describe this. The universe has been kind in placing me in exactly the geography where I needed to be so that I could understand what the value of my voice and my life experience would be. You see what I'm saying?
I do think that is geography, but I think this was in you before you came to Frankfurt. You found the platform for you. There's many people who have the proximity that you have, but don't feel that they needed to take action, and you did.
And I think you're right. I should add to that then. Yeah, I do believe you're right. I shall add to that that I grew up in a culture that values humanitarian aid and public service. I saw it around me all of the time. And so that was natural for me. I think also, and it's fair to mention this, I am in a position in my life where I can do what I'm doing. If I had many small children at home, if I had a very demanding 9 to 5 inflexible career, if I were ill, if I were living under really austere financial constraints, and that describes a lot of people, maybe I couldn't have done exactly what I have been able to do. So I understand the privilege and the latitude, but I still think that there are things that people can do, small things, and that's going to be the topic, I think, of our conversation.
That's the topic of our conversation. I do have a couple of questions for you that I don't want to forget, but we're going to dive into that. But before, I want people to understand why I brought you here. Why are you the person? Why I'm asking to come speak about that. Not only you have your history that leads you to be very sensitive and to have taken action, but you also have expertise, right? So if you can tell us a little bit about your academic background and professional background that led you to have the expertise to be able to speak online and teach people about democracy and civil action.
Thank you. I'm a Germanistin, is what they call it. So I specialize in German history, literature, philosophy studies, and I studied that as an undergraduate degree with a minor in journalism. Always thinking, oh, maybe I could work somehow with the UN one day. Wouldn't that be great? I'll be able to speak and write. Then we ended up living internationally, and I knew that the one career that was absolutely portable was writing. So I've written academically. I research a lot. That's where I'm very, very happy. At the same time, I trained as a public speaker. I have a theater background and grew up kind of on the stage. It's a weird hybrid of my strengths, very introverted and very extroverted. So I've taught language on the university level. I've written books. I've worked in those spaces in between raising 4 children in multiple cultures. And I always kept that active. Maybe this should give everyone out there a little bit of hope, is that in whatever landscape you might find yourself, recognize what your training and your expertise is, and then always keep them alive. Even if it's just for a while, I was just writing small academic articles along the way. I had contact with important publishers. I did that. I started speaking and moved into that arena of speaking thanks to entities, organizations that invited me. And I just said yes. I said yes. I thought I can do this, and stepped out on the stage and started speaking. So there's a background in public speaking, a background in academic research, a background in language
And history.
and history. My graduate degree, it was in a deeper area of German studies, which is pre-World War II German literature. So I was steeped decades ago, steeped in understanding the fall, all of the signs of the fall of a democracy, of a free culture, and the rise of authoritarianism. And I literally thought at one time in my life, that's all behind me. We'll just lock that up. It was nice that I studied it. And now it's come to full use because I am watching step by step the signs of democratic erosion, exactly like I studied in my graduate degree, exactly like all of the literature that I analyzed and wrote papers about.
That's exactly what you're teaching on Instagram. We've been friends for many years now. I've been
Yes.
following you for many years, and I'm devouring everything you do because it's so full of meaning. But you had maybe a couple thousand followers, I think, a year ago,
Yeah,
something like that,
yeah.
1,000 something. I remember, I don't know why I looked into it, but I had the instinct that this was going to explode, and it did. You are
Oh,
over 200,000 followers right now on Instagram. Followers don't matter, but still the engagement that's on your content is through the roof, and it's responding to a need that many people are feeling. And that's, I think, how you transform all that experience you had into something meaningful today to help people navigate what's happening with the erosion of democracy and how to respond to it. I wonder what has allowed you to step into that visibility and into taking your phone, using social media to share what you had to share.
when I started, which was February, I stayed very, very calm and self-contained from the time of the US elections, so that was November, until a couple of weeks into the new administration. Again, I'm a US citizen, but I've lived outside of my home country for 35 years, so I've always been eyeing my home country's politics and culture from outside of its borders. And then a couple of things happened that just pushed me. I knew that I couldn't stay silent. I recognized suddenly the the confluence of my geography, my background, my teaching, my my work. I had already been working with Ukrainian refugees, like I said, since the beginning of the war. I was deeply steeped in that, and I couldn't stay silent anymore. So literally one day, I sat down on my on the carpet in my bedroom. It's the only room in our entire home that has carpet, and I needed to have that acoustic quality so it doesn't echo, to be honest with you. And there was really good light. And I said, okay, I'm just going to introduce myself. Why should anyone listen to somebody who has a background in German studies right now? And I just started. And I vowed to myself I was going to do it every day. That is important, is that you do it every day and you keep on talking into the void. Then I started getting responses, and they were unilaterally grateful and desperate. Wait, there's someone like you out there and you're talking about this. Wait, you're going to educate us about it. So you're right, Amel. The numbers say one thing. It's the quality of the responses that say something very different. And there are more people than most people would imagine that are desperate for a voice to lead, for a voice to clarify, for a voice to educate, for a voice to encourage, for a voice to move and motivate and mobilize. And these are the comments that I'm sifting through every single day.
And a
So
voice of
that
trust, I would add.
I think that might be the most important thing.
Mhm.
Maybe that's the most important thing. And, and
Trust.
and that's a delicate thing to develop trust with people that have never met you in person. It's a delicate thing.
That was
And so,
my biggest issue, and this is why, for me, you are the right person to have here. While I was trying the past 2 years to speak up, to use my voice, the biggest thing was knowing that no matter what, as human beings, we're all biased, no matter if we want it or not. And there are so many voices out there, but very few I actually trusted to
Mm,
be able to educate myself on making sure that I'm not speaking from a place of bias, rather a place of fear of our humanity and our democracy being in danger. And
yes.
that was a fine line to do, especially in my case with the topic of the genocide in Gaza. That was
Yeah.
extremely polarizing. I would like to dive deeper into how this happened, but I want to go back to something you said before, because this whole episode is about one, making sure that we do speak up. Second, how do we do it when we don't know where to start and we're not sure we are equipped, right? And third, you did mention something, maybe that's a good place to start. Not everybody has the resources, the time, the energy, and the mental bandwidth to actually become activists and to become agents of change.
Yes.
But you also said, but we all can do something. So tell me more how you would encourage us to find our voice, but also what is the one thing we can do as civilians, as global citizens, but also as leaders and solopreneurs who have a voice.
Yes. Let's go back to your word trust, which I think is key. We all have trusted relationships. We all have colleagues, family members, neighbors, friends from our childhood, whoever it might be. And I think that's where everyone can start. So everyone can start by educating people within their closest circle, their closest sphere. That requires, of course, that we are educated ourselves. So we need to inform ourselves correctly. You don't need to study all of the platforms, but find 2 or 3 voices. I suggest certain scholars that are experts in the field of the erosion of democracy. They've been doing this for the entirety of their careers. They're key voices that I always refer to. I could name them here if we want to, or
Yeah.
we put them in
Show
the
notes.
show notes. Yeah. Um, One of them is Timothy Snyder. Timothy Snyder, a Yale professor, multilingual. He's now moved to be a professor in Canada, if that says anything to anyone.
Hmm.
His book on tyranny is a guidebook for the average person anywhere to understand the steps that we have seen historically that walk us through the erosion of democracy. Another key voice is Anne Applebaum, very brilliant author. Her book, Twilight of Democracy, should be on everyone's bedstands. Everyone should be reading that. Um, I'm not going to overload because I could give 20, but I would say start with those two, Timothy Snyder and Anne Applebaum. Inform yourself. And then just start having conversations. Ask questions. What are you most nervous about, Uncle Alfred? What are the things that concern you? Or your work colleagues? Are you noticing things that don't feel like they're quite what democracy used to look like? And let's have a conversation about it. And then when you're equipped with that information, then you can reliably respond and say, well, you know, this expert said this, and it looks exactly like this point in Chile's history or Argentina's history or Hungary's history or Turkey's history or German history. And that's usually where I'm coming from is German history, only because that's my expertise. So we start in our relationships of trust. We start close to our feet. And then we speak in the larger circles. Then we have gained confidence in ourselves. We've refined our ability to talk about these topics that are delicate and they're polarizing. And they hit very often on the nerve of identity. Who am I as an American? Who am I as Algerian or as Palestinian or whatever it might be? And you what I'm suggesting to my followers is that you create what I'm calling a democracy defense pod. It sounds very cheerleader-ish, but folks, we need to have tools in our pockets. So I'm just going to call it the DDP, the Democracy Defense Pod. It can be 5 people, it can be 15 people, it can be 50 people, but you meet whenever you can face to face and you talk and you share the ideas of the wisest, most reliable voices in whatever field it is. They're very reliable voices out there that have built their careers, that have built their reputations on speaking deeply about these topics. And from those democracy defense pods, then you identify what the most necessary action is that you need to take, because we need to get out of the comfort of our sofas and from behind our screens where we talk and we analyze, which is highly valuable, and we need to get on our feet and we need to move. We need to mobilize. We need to mobilize. And that could be showing up at a demonstration. It could also be showing up to protect the vulnerable. Might they be at risk for being deported? It could be standing shoulder to shoulder with anybody in a marginalized community. That's mobilizing, that's acting. I'm suggesting for my followers in the US to start right now in getting people registered to vote for the midterms, getting people educated about how to vote, organizing carpools to the polls, sitting in the polls themselves. That's sort of very practical, in the real life space action. It does a number of things. Not only does it break down our despair, because action is the antidote to despair. We will despair if we only sit and think about these things. But that's what the enemies of democracy want. They want us to despair. It is a strategy. We have to understand that we're being played. It's a strategy. We are supposed to despair. We're also supposed to say, there's no truth anywhere. I'm going to unplug. I'm not going to listen to anyone. That is also typical authoritarian strategy, is to make us just give up. There's no truth anywhere. Don't believe it for a moment. There is truth. There is viable action. And when you're in a space with other people, you're taken out of that vacuum of of isolation. Solidarity will help us to not feel alone. It gives us energy. We also breed better ideas when we're working in our pods, okay? It also sends a sign to those who think that we're despairing and we're crouching in a corner that, hey, we're numerous, we're not backing down, we're linking arms, we are a force to be reckoned with. One more thing, this is the last very practical thing. There is an app. It's called the 5 Calls app. You can just search it, the 5 Calls app. And the 5 Calls app gives you scripts. If you happen to be in the US, it gives you scripts for how you call your elected representatives, and you tell them exactly what you elected them for. You are paying their salaries. They work for you. And so in a constitutional democracy, you have that right and you have that responsibility to remind your elected representatives what you expect from them. So use the 5 Calls app. I would highly recommend that all of my DDPs, the Democracy Defense Pods, use that first.
I'm just going to summarize 3 important tips that you gave here. Start in your own circle. Create your own pod. It can be about democracy or any other topic you care about, and then take action. Mobilize, take action, and mobilize. I love how effective it is, right? The one thing that you said that I want to highlight is that the enemy, what they want is for us to feel despaired. And action is the medicine to feeling despair. And the other thing I want to highlight is when you talked about the people who simply then choose to unplug because it's too much, because we can't keep up. And I'd rather how many times I've heard this? I feel so depressed when I look at the news that I don't watch the news anymore. So how would you respond to those people?
With empathy. My first response would be, no kidding. I get it. And again, I'm somebody who is not dealing with a chronically ill parent or a chronically ill child or a chronically ill partner. I myself am healthy and hale. We're sitting in a stable place. So I want to respond with empathy and say, I get it. Of course, that's how you feel. You feel like millions of people do. And then just gently say, that is precisely what the enemies of democracy want you to feel, just to quietly say that. And so are there small steps that we can take? And it's because when trust is eroded on the highest level, it trickles down, and this is also part of the strategy. Not only do we stop trusting any of our politicians, how often have we heard they're all crooks, they're all, rotten and corrupt to the core. That's actually not true. We know that that's not true. We know that they're not all equally corrupt. But because it becomes so overwhelming and because the strategy has been to throw so much dirt in our face that we can't even cleanse our lenses so that we can see clearly, we have to recognize that's one of the tactics that's being used so that we give up. Recognize that. Recognize that the next step is for us to lose our trust in the people around us. And that's what's happening right now, is that we are entering a phase that is really, I'll just call it what it is. It's what happens in authoritarian cultures, is that you are afraid of your neighbor. Your neighbor's going to turn you in. Your neighbor is going to call the authorities on you. That is authoritarianism. And so we need to create then, we need to create empathy with those who feel that way, not blame them. They have been infected with fear, intentionally infected with fear. And fear is the most driving emotion, and authoritarians know that. They want us to be afraid. So get close to the people who have given up and say, just follow me. Just look at this one thing. Look at this one true thing. Look at this one heartening move. Look at this one bit of fact. Spoon feed in a way to bring people back to a sense of, number one, trusting someone, even if it's just you, but then trusting maybe one or two other sources. That's why one of my main emphases going forward will be media literacy, because the media is being also hijacked to confuse us. And that's why people stop watching the media and they'll go to TikTok just to watch cute cat videos, because that is a form of medication. It's a form of escapism, right? So it starts with empathy with those who feel overwhelmed, and then making sure that you have a warm and trusted relationship with them, and sharing small bits that will encourage them to re-enter the arena. They can watch you.
Mm.
They can watch you do something
They can
bold.
watch you. Oh, I'm taking this away. They can watch you do your thing. Which leads me to the second obstacle that I'd like to talk about, which I would summarize in one word. I've never understood this word until these past 2 years, which is loneliness. When you feel like you are the only one who truly cares to the point that you want to do something.
Mhm.
So how would you handle that?
Well, I feel emotional when you say that. I start feeling emotion sort of rising up in me, so I'm going to try and stay really rational. This is a time of extreme loneliness. And I think that one of the, well, that's the flip side of social media, right? We think that we're so connected, and we live in these isolated silos that don't give us what our souls really need. And what our souls really need are deep conversations face to face. This is the next best thing, just seeing you on a screen and talking about these things
Mm.
for extended periods of time. The human body and the human soul is not intended to live in sound bites. Our whole mechanism is made for long human stories, and we're not getting enough of those. And so we need those face to face. And I can't even tell you how many of my followers have written to me privately and said, I'm I'm on my last gasping breath. I feel so isolated. I feel so isolated. At least I have this place. So the loneliness, again, is another tactic. It comes from a strategy that is used anciently and in modern history that polarizes people. Let's talk about polarization for a moment, because polarization is the strategy. One of the first steps that an authoritarian will take is to demonize the opposition. Not just that this is healthy debate, but they are enemies of the state. Anyone who is not in full and complete alignment with my whim of the day is an enemy of the state, which immediately drives a wedge,
Separation.
not only in society between left or right or one ethnicity or another, but it starts splitting neighborhoods, work colleagues, families. I can't tell you how many family members are at odds with one another. I'm not saying anything new. Anyone listening to me is saying, that's what's happening. People are split down the middle. When our core relationships are at risk, then we don't know where to turn. And
How would you
people,
recommend to take action from there? I mean, it's been a journey for me. I could speak for for it for a long time, but I'm curious to
sure.
see what would be your take to move from that place of feeling like I'm alone. It's not even about demonizing, feeling demonized. It's caring enough
So
to
deep.
want to do something, but you feel like it's hard to bring people with you.
Mhm.
And that honestly, sometimes I think people would think I was completely nuts for being so obsessed about what was going on. And I would bore people at dinners and tables. I could literally see that nobody wanted to hear anymore about my stories and what I cared
Ah,
about. So how would you have recommended to deal with that situation?
okay, okay, a lot of thoughts on that. A lot of thoughts on that. Let me try and organize them. This isn't necessarily in ranking as the most important, the most salient to the least, but leadership is always lonely.
Hmm.
Leadership always carries with it the burden of loneliness. You read any of the autobiographies of the great, faith-driven leaders, the great political leaders. My goodness, Winston Churchill, from Winston Churchill to Abraham Lincoln to Gandhi to these are people of tremendous loneliness because they felt the passion that you feel, that I feel, and couldn't quite get everyone to follow them, to follow with them. Another one is that when we feel grief, okay, we're going back to the very beginning of our time together. Let's go
Hmm.
back to that tender nerve. When we feel grief, because we are feeling grief, we're feeling grief not only at watching the slaughter of innocents, but also watching the erosion of something precious and luminous, which is democracy and freedom. We are carrying the burden of grief. To just recognize that we are in some state of grief in and of itself allows us to feel that and say, because I'm telling you, as a bereaved mother, I've been the woman at the dinner party that everyone wanted to get away from because that's the thing that I needed to talk about. And now I've folded that sort of into this other kind of grief. And everywhere I go, I want to talk with people about what on earth is happening to our freedoms. And not everybody wants to hear that. All you need to do is to find listening ear, one listening ear to hear your story.
That's so
Remember that
huge.
leadership is going to be lonely, is going to be lonely. That's why you need to find your pod. You need to find I need to find people like you, Amel, and I need to talk with you regularly. I don't need to have 250,000 even, as long as I have those core people that will remind me you're not insane, you're not crazy, I'm with you in this. And that we are experiencing grief and we're going to move through this. We're going to bear it because we are strong. We have been through lots of different layers of loss before. And when we have our group, our safe group, then we have solidarity, energy. We have wind beneath our wings in a way.
Wow.
And we will make our way through this.
I knew that there was a connection between our first episodes and this one. And now it's becoming even clearer. And I have an aha moment. We talked a lot about the five stages of, it's very typical, the stages of grief. Everybody has heard about it. But now I can see how it's important to go through those phases before we can take action. So if I had to use my experience to share my take on this is the biggest challenge was to go through the grief, go through the healing, and at the same time having that urgency of action. It's not, I don't know if you see what I'm talking about.
I do.
Like how to
I do.
juggle taking the time to heal while at the same time knowing that there's not much time.
Yeah, there is a stage. There is a stage also where of grief, it's not talked about a lot, but where you must take action. If you stay, I've written about this actually, if you stay curled up in the nautilus of grief, I call it the nautilus of grief. If you stay there too long, you shrink.
Hmm.
You come out, you might be walking bent over for a long, 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 long time
Right.
because you've been curled in on yourself. So it's going to be a different time for everyone, but we're all experiencing. Anyone who's listening to this is here because they're experiencing pain, they're experiencing loss, fear, isolation, loneliness, all of those things. We have to recognize when it's going to be unhealthy for us to not move.
Hmm.
And then we take that step. For me, in the literal grief of burying our child, it was a moment where I realized, and it was a flash of intuition, if I stay here much longer, I will either never emerge or I will emerge a smaller person. I want my sorrow and my life experience to be of benefit to other people. That's what we all want. We want to be useful in this world. And so at that moment, we step out. It's going to make us frightened. Our palms will be trembling. Our knees will be shaking. We'll think that we're all alone. But I can promise you, love is waiting for you out there. Loving, receptive listeners are waiting for you to move. I didn't think that. I didn't think it when I was sitting on my carpet in my bedroom, just recording reels. I didn't ever anticipate. And frankly, it wasn't my goal to have a really big following like this. I wasn't charting the numbers, and then it just took off. And that alone is proof for me that love is waiting out there. The need to connect is waiting. So listeners, friends, everybody, make that step, even if it's just baby steps out into that place. Raise your voice, build relationships of trust, help others mobilize. It's the world is waiting for you to do that. Waiting for you to do that.
We don't have the time to dive deeper now onto it, but I do still want to talk a little bit about the fact of being solo entrepreneurs, small business owners, which are the listeners of this podcast. We talked a lot about now how to deal with these different stages of wanting to take action, from realizing we have to figuring out how to do it, but also how to deal with all those obstacles we discussed. But I'm curious to see, how do you see, what's your take about the responsibility that we have as solopreneurs to speak up, and how can we do it to balance our voices, our platform visibility with actual the work that we have to do without hurting our income and our revenue? I wonder if you ask yourself this question.
Well, yes. Well, I'm fielding these sorts of questions all the time because people are afraid.
Hmm.
They're afraid of, and I have a number of stories that I could rattle off right now. People are afraid of offending their clients, of offending their
Hmm.
followers, of being doxxed or canceled. There are people whose livelihoods hang in the balance. I can name them right now if they speak about things politically. Um, but there are ways to speak, let's say, in code, in very humane terms and not necessarily political terms, where you just say, we really do care about everyone, don't we? And gosh, my neighbor has a migrant or an immigrant background, and I've been so inspired by her. Those are code ways of supporting things that have been extremely politicized. You see what I mean? So you can still include that in your conversations. You can still make it clear, in a way that will appeal or at least speak to a broader audience. The next step that I am taking, where it really does make it an entrepreneurial effort, is that I have now a digital marketing and a branding organization that's going to help me understand the landscape a little bit better, and how to
You're
build a brand.
investing in it now. And I want to talk about
Yeah,
this briefly, because that's
yeah.
another thing. At some point, we need, just like when we talk about investing ourselves for our personal growth, you are now investing in this purpose. Do you want to share a little
Yes.
bit about what was this journey like to professionalize now your activism?
I know, and it's very new for me because I want to be clear, and this is not virtue signaling. Everything that I've done up to this point has been volunteer.
Mhm.
All my trips around the world and it's been volunteer. It's been out of pocket. And I have felt that that has been the thing that I could offer, is that I can speak for some people who are voiceless. And so it's been humanitarian philanthropic work up to this point. There comes a time where you're going to build a team. And if you have a team, which you need when you have a significant online presence, then you can't expect that everybody's going to work for nothing for you. And so you need to monetize something. And for me, actually, it's been a big ethical question. You know, it's been an ethical question. Can I require people to even subscribe to my Substack? You know, people are willing to do that. So it's a big step. But here's something I want to say also to anybody who might be making that same move from humanitarian volunteer volunteerism or philanthropy to turning it into a solopreneur, as you talk about it, or a business model, that also helps other people take you seriously.
Mhm.
And it also is another level of taking myself very seriously. We're all in. This is not some sort of hobby. This is my mission. This is my mission and this is my work. And so not only does that send a signal to others, but it's a commitment to myself. We're all in on this. And and that's actually tremendously empowering. It's tremendously empowering. Um, and I feel deep gratitude that I'm in a position where I can do that. Deep gratitude
Amazing.
for, yeah.
Oh my God. I hope that all of you who are listening just feel that energy that Melissa is sharing with us today. And I would highly recommend you to listen to her videos. Are you also on TikTok? I only follow you on Instagram.
That's the next step. So
Next
I'm on
step.
Instagram and I'm on Substack where I'm longer works. And then we're moving to TikTok, we're moving to YouTube. There's going to be a website, there's going to be a weekly newsletter, and then eventually a podcast.
I do think that we should follow you very closely. A lot of things are going to happen. I would love to have you again. So I hope you'll be fine and okay with coming back to share with us more about that, because I think this is such an important work. And if you can reflect back on your experience and the journey you're going through, would be wonderful.
I would love to. I would love to.
I do have a last question, if we could make it short, although it's a big one,
Okay.
because I realize we did not say that clearly. Why do you think it is important for solopreneurs and small business owners to speak up and use their voices?
Because you are a small business owner and because you have a small, um, I don't want to say it's an audience, but you have a small community, a smaller community. You know your clients, you know your customers, you know the people that you're speaking with. Because it's tidy and tight, people trust you on a level. We talk about people trusting these huge global brands. They trust Adidas and Nike and they trust Coca-Cola, I guess. But it's a very different relationship when you are a solopreneur. People actually have met you, they work with you, and they there's a higher likelihood that they're going to know you in real life. Isn't that true? Right? You have a
Totally.
smaller community. So the level of trust is much, much higher. It also means that you can have a different kind of connection with your community. You can speak with them in a way that the CEO of a huge multinational can't speak to his people. They try. Well, they try.
Mhm.
Very different for someone who has a tighter reach. So you already have that big issue of trust in your pocket. You trust your customers and your clients, your listeners, and they trust you. That is
Love it.
that is power. And like you and I said before we even started recording, that is a responsibility. And I think it's a sacred responsibility. There's something sacred about that, of 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 building on people's trust.
Okay, that's it.
That's it.
Thank you so, so much, Melissa. I don't want to add more to that because I think that's a perfect way to end with the word responsibility. And that's what had made me pause the podcast for a bit, because I felt I was responsible to say the right things and I did not have the right words. But now I'm so happy to be surrounded with people like you, to feel that we can start speaking up louder now to take action. I did take action in many ways as a civilian, but I do think that it is a responsibility. So thank you so much for helping me in my journey, inspiring me in my journey. And I really hope that every one of you who's listening, go check out Melissa. Could you please let us know? I'll put all the links in the show notes, but could you
Sure.
please let us know where we can find you?
So you can find me on Substack under my name, Melissa Dalton Bradford. You can find me on Instagram under MDB. Those are my initials, Global Mom. You will find me soon, and I'll just make sure that I get all of those links to you on TikTok, on YouTube, and I'll be opening up a newsletter in my website. I'll let those all come. That's all coming in the top of 2026. So very, very soon.
So much impact. So, my dear listeners, if you want to find all the resources that Melissa mentioned earlier, as well as all her contacts, the best way is to go to thetimeisnow.biz/317. Thank you so much, Melissa. And to end, would you like to please complete the sentence? The time is now to.
The time is now to educate yourself and others and mobilize.
Thank you so much. My dear listeners, I cannot wait to continue this journey with you. And I hope that together we can continue to speak up, to take action and make a difference. Let's continue this journey together. And stay tuned to turn all your challenges into great opportunities.